Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jackie and this is Jackie is Making, a place where I talk about all the knit garments that I'm creating. And today I'm talking to you about my Feel Good Shawl by Andrea Mowry, or otherwise known as DreaReneeKnits. First, I'm going to talk about the yarn details and then I'm going to go into some pattern details. And towards the end, I'm going to give my overall thoughts and feelings, like how satisfied, dissatisfied I am with the entire project. And the reason why I cast on this shawl is just because I was looking for something to wear in the office when the air conditioning is really ramped up, but you're wearing a short sleeve or a sleeveless shirt, and it just feels a little bit too wintry to bring in a sweater or a sweatshirt. So I had this idea of making a shawl in like those bright, vibrant summer spring colors that would still feel summery, but it would be something that I could wrap up in the office, but it wouldn't be a blanket. So I put in a DK weight and off I went searching, and this was an item that came up on either the first or second list of Ravelry, and it first caught my eye because it was an Andrea Mowry pattern, and I know she is super famous for her shawls. And then when I clicked within it, I saw that it was knit in brioche, which I hadn't knit before. So immediately it was like an intrigue, like, oh, it's a new skill I could learn. And then as I was scrolling through the projects in Ravelry and looking what other people had made, I saw Tori Yu's version and it was just electric. The colors looked so beautiful on her and it just paired perfectly with that idea of exactly what I wanted, that bright and summery item for the summer that was gonna keep me warm. So I immediately bought the pattern and I looked at Andrea's recommended yarn, which was the Wandering Flock's DK. And I went to the Wandering Flock and I was like, oh no, this yarn, it was almost completely sold out. So in that DK weight, there was maybe like 2 or 3 colors available. And so I started looking at other vendors, going to their sites, trying to figure out if that was something feasible. They also had like nothing in stock. So what I did next was I went to their Instagram, and what I love about this age of social media is almost always like a company that keeps up is going to be posting somewhere on their social what's going on with their inventory. So nice about Wandering Flock. I looked back literally only like 2 posts and it said that their new restock was going to be in a couple weeks. So I literally went into my calendar app, set a date for when the restock was going to happen. And I got so excited because I just knew in 2 weeks, like on that Monday, I was going to shop, and lo and behold, once I logged in on that date, the colors that I wanted were available. I will say they weren't the exact colors that Tori Yu used. Not all of those were available, but I picked a couple of the ones that she used, and then I just picked a couple of other bright colors that I thought would go well with it as well. And I placed my order, and it came just a short while later, and I got up and running. So to get started, I used the Wandering Flock's Merino DK. This is a hand-dyed yarn from Brooklyn, New York. For this project, I used 5 skeins almost completely. Almost every color was used up until the end. And this yarn in particular is labeled as an extra fine merino. It's a 4-ply, and it's ethically sourced from Peru and is Ocotex certified and was shipped to me in recyclable packaging. I am really curious if any of you guys know, how does a yarn get that extra fine label? Like for instance, what's the difference between 100% merino wool versus 100% fine merino versus 100% extra fine merino? Just be curious like what those criterias are, and I'd be even more curious if we could see under a microscope like what those yarns look like. If you've ever seen a piece of hair under a microscope, you know it has like those scales on it, and apparently like in a superwash you're just removing a lot of those scales and making it so it's less like grabby. And so I'd just be interested to see like a regular 100% merino versus that fine and extra fine, just to see how much more scaled down the extra fine is. And is it truly just a marketing term? Like, are they just saying, oh, this is my extra fine merino? Or is it actually you know, a level that you have to get to call it that. So yeah, if you guys know like what's the actual criteria to get it to that level, I'd be super interested in that. I tried to do some Googling and didn't really find anything. So yeah, how does it get to that criteria? Is there a regulation around that? I'd just be interested. As a gal who works in marketing, I'd like to know. What really excited me about this yarn is when I got it in the mail, the colors are like that perfect mix of neon and pastel. And there's really no other way to describe it. So in some pictures, like even how I'm wearing it now, it looks pretty pastel, but in some pictures or in some lights, it can look very neon, you know, especially contrasted to like some really neutral colors. It can look very neon. So I loved that aspect of the yarn. I loved that it was a more muted neon, if you will, instead of being like a super high contrast, annoying neon. To me, they feel like very wearable neons, which is very attractive, at least to me, and made them just so beautiful to look at. So now my 2 criteria of this yarn. 1, it is very splitty, and 2, it's insanely pilly. So the first one, it being very splitty, this, like I didn't think was going to be too huge of an issue. If you've ever worked with a fairly splitty yarn, a lot of superwash yarn tends to split, like I said, because it doesn't have those like scales to hold on to it. So what happens is when you're going, you'll accidentally, especially with like a sharp needle, you'll go through the middle of that strand and you'll accidentally knit only a portion of it. So then like part of the stitch is almost hanging off in a kind of unsightly way. And so what happened to me in this instance is as I was knitting brioche, I wouldn't see it, and then I would get 2 rows past and it would be like, oh no, like the yarn split a little bit further down, so I would have to ladder down just to fix it. And that happened to me at least 6 times. And if you've knit brioche before, you know it's not very fun to ladder down in, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So it was totally annoying that it just kept happening. And especially when you have to ladder down, not from your own mistakes, but just because the yarn is so splitty, it's so frustrating. So that was really my first gripe with the yarn. And then my second one, and really like the biggest annoyance for me with this yarn, and you'll learn like really with this whole project, is just how pilling this yarn is. And I think the reason why it's so disappointing to me is because I'm relating it to like, you know, when you get a new shirt at a store and it's so beautiful and crisp and polished, and then you wash it and it's still good, but it's not as good. And then maybe you wash it like 2 or 3, 5 more times, and it's literally just not the same. It's not the same garment. It doesn't hang the same. It looks old. And a lot of times with sweaters, or like shirts that have like a high mix of polyester, like I find any sweatshirt that's like a cotton polyester blend, this happens a ton, where you'll be pilling really soon. And so honestly, that sort of feeling happened to me with this yarn, where the yarn was pilling as I was knitting, and that has never happened to me before. So I was like halfway through this pink section when I just noticed, wow, that yarn is pilling a lot. And then as I kept going, it kept getting more and more pilly. And you know, it's not like I'm rubbing this yarn against crazy friction fabrics or anything. I'm being very gentle with my knits when I'm knitting them. So yeah, it was very surprising to say the least. What's also very crazy about this is their website literally says under this description of the yarn, low tendency to pill. What? Any yarn that pills while you're knitting it does not have a low tendency to pill. But I talked with a couple of my friends who have been knitting 10 years plus, and they said that is definitely a yarn issue, and you should email the company and ask like, what is going on? Is this a manufacturing issue? So on and so forth. So I did email them and I haven't heard back yet, but the overall thing with this is just like, is this a brioche thing? I don't know. I wouldn't think it would be. Is this a user error? Like, did I do something wrong? Or is this literally just what happens with extra fine merino because it's brushed down so far? Is it just so prone to pilling? I thought it would be number 3, but with the website saying it's not prone to pilling, I kind of don't know what to believe. So yeah, that is really just my overall disappointment with the yarn. But now getting into a little bit more about the pattern. So the pattern was really well written and it was very clear. I will say my absolute favorite part about the pattern was how many videos Andrea included. So with every new technique within the pattern, there's a short little like 2 or 3 minute video that walks you through exactly what to do. And my favorite part about the videos was that she featured both English style and continental style knitting within them. And she walks you through at a very enjoyable pace. Like, it's slow enough that you can follow, but it's not slow enough that you get bored. And I felt so strongly that she was such a good teacher. I had never knit brioche before. I had never done a garter tab cast on, never done double brioche, and never done 2-color brioche. So and I've never done an I-cord bind off. So 5 new skills that I really like needed hand holding to figure out. And I felt like she explained them so perfectly that I only had to watch these videos once or twice to pick it up and start doing it. And I felt like that is just invaluable in a pattern. I didn't have to like go to YouTube and source my own tutorials. Just having hers there was just so ideal and such a great aspect to this pattern. My least favorite part of the pattern was a little bit of the lack of creativity. And this is just completely subjective, but when you read her description of the pattern, she says that she just kind of cast this on one day and just kept knitting and just wanted to be like inspired by the garment. And I feel like that's really clear, one, in how much yarn she uses. So like I said, with those 5 skeins of yarn, I used almost completely all of them. Like, I maybe have 10 grams of each of a couple of them left, and a couple of them even less than that. And so you can tell she's like knitting up to almost the end of the skein and then switching colors. And then the other thing is this shawl looks very similar in construction to a lot of her other shawls, which is very common with designers, right? So she a lot of times uses that garter tab cast on, and then she has the increases go straight up the middle, like it's like a very typical triangle shaped shawl, which is totally fine as well. I would just say the reason why I'm bringing this up is just because you can tell she was knitting like this 2-color brioche, and then she was like, oh, what if we just do 1? And then, oh, what if we just did double? And it very much feels like there's no rhyme or reason to it, which is completely fine. I obviously picked this pattern because I thought it was beautiful, but I will say you get that sense of it while you're making it, that it was just kind of on a whim and didn't have a ton of structure or reasoning behind the design. And I hope that makes sense to you guys. I don't know if I would necessarily demote it for that. It's just, it feels like something that's obvious to me while I'm making it, and just felt like something to bring up. So then after I knit the pattern, I had to block it. And let me tell you, whoa, that is not for the faint of heart, okay? Oh my goodness. So blocking, if you're unfamiliar, is when you submerge your garment in water and then you lay it flat to dry, and you kind of lay it to shape it to the exact shape that you want. And I don't have a ton of experience with superwash yarn. My last one I can remember is my Musselburgh hat, which also stretched to oblivion. But this was insane. And I've heard from some people too that brioche can have this like stretchy effect. But oh my God, it was so scary. So once I got it wet, let it soak, and then started lifting it out, it was, it was terrifying. It was like it was stretching so much I could see through it. And this is a pretty dense fabric. And it was just like, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I block this? Did I just ruin my garment? Holy crap. So I laid it out. I tried to scrunch it back up a little bit, and it ended up being the next day. It still wasn't coming back to life, if you will. And I remembered with my Musselburgh hat that I ended up putting it in the dryer for a couple minutes, and that really shrunk it. Like, I don't want to say shrink, but it brings it back to its like elasticity. At least for me. Do not listen to me. Please do not put any of your superwash in the dryer because of me. Please look it up and listen to someone else. I do not want to be the reason that any of your stuff is messed up. And never ever put non-superwash in a washer or dryer. Okay? Do not yell at me if you mess something up. But anyways, I put this in the dryer for 2 minutes, and that it right back up, and it was back to being my shawl that I knew and loved. So I just like as a token, like, so just as a warning to anybody, if you're blocking a shawl that superwash and also is brioche and you're freaking out, if it's superwash, I personally would just put it back in the dryer for a couple minutes to zhuzh it back up. But also, I think it may have been fine if I 100% let it completely dry. I'm not sure. It also was just too big. Like, I tried it on when it was probably about 10% wet, and it wasn't the same. It was just so drapey and wasn't the same yarn that I had knit with and like was used to the texture of. So that did help me. And so now for my overall ratings and experiences, I will say I'm probably gonna rate the yarn pretty low, probably like a 5 out of 10. The pattern I would rate a little bit higher, more like an 8 out of 10, especially with those really helpful videos. And then it's only docking down a couple points just for like some of the complexity and creativity. And then as far as my knitting experience goes, I would rate that a 7 out of 10. It was so enjoyable to knit brioche, to learn brioche. I'm only taking some points off because at the end, the rows are so long and it was just kind of a dread to pick up. So just beware if you are picking up this pattern. And if you were to ask me, would I make this again? I would say no, but I would absolutely be interested in another of Andrea Mowry's patterns and another brioche pattern by her. And I think that might be a route that I'll go this winter. My overall rating of this shawl is probably like a 7 out of 10. I'm mostly disappointed because of the yarn. It looks very pilly to me up close when I'm looking at it, and it just looks worn. And I've tried gleaning it, and I feel like that's agitated it even a little bit more. And I've also been wanting to like take a fabric shaper to it, which I probably will do that, but I just wanted to give you guys a real and accurate representation of it before I really did that. I also feel like it's a little bit looking like a blanket in some of my work calls, which is super disappointing because I wore it with the intention of wearing it at work, and so far I'm loving wearing it at work, but on camera in calls when I have it draped around me, which I'll actually show you guys like how I wear it a lot in calls. I don't typically wear it how I had it for this video just because that's a little bit more of like a wintry look, more of like a very early spring, I would say. So a lot of times in calls, I will kind of wear it a little bit more like this. And it's so beautiful. Like if you're a knitter, you're like, oh my gosh, it's stunning. What is that? But I think sometimes if I'm just with like everyday people on a call, they would think I'm being maybe a little bit unprofessional because I have a blanket draped over me. Let me know if you guys think it looks like that or not. So yeah, that's kind of the only disappointing thing, and something I'm gonna think about before I knit my next shawl is maybe my next one should be out of a fingering or a lace weight so that it looks a little bit more shawl-like and less blanket-like. It's honestly something I did not even consider when I cast this on, was that it could potentially look like a blanket. And the only thing making it not look blanket-like is like, who has a neon blanket? I mean, I don't know anybody that does. So that's the only thing making it not blanket-like, but yeah, that aspect of it is just a little bit disappointing. Overall, I would recommend this to anybody who's interested in learning brioche. For me, hands down, this was the best pattern that I could have picked to learn brioche, just because you're knitting, like I said, brioche, double brioche, and two-color brioche, and Andrea is walking you through the entire thing, and you're getting plenty of time to learn it and learn the entire like section before you move on to the next section. I will say, like, if a friend were to ask me, for instance, should I make this, or am I ready for brioche? I would ask them, are you comfortable with 1x1 rib? Just because you're a lot of times moving the yarn to the front or to the back. I would also ask, how comfortable are you with laddering down? And how good are you at reading your knitting? Because if you are laddering down, you really have to be able to read it well. And so for those reasons, I would say, usually someone who's been knitting very intensively, I shouldn't say usually. If you've been knitting like a mad woman like me, after 6 months, I would say you are probably ready to start brioche. But yeah, it's like with anything in knitting. If you are open to the skill and you're open to messing up, you are ready to do it. And with videos on YouTube, there's no reason why you can't just jump right in and learn from the get-go. So that's all I have for today's video for you guys. If you enjoy these finished object videos, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know what you're currently working on down below. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe so you don't miss the next video from me. Next week, I'll be talking all about my current works in progress and any new acquisitions that I have. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.